everyone, and welcome back to a new video. Today we are doing the Reluctant TBR Tag. I did see both Amanda from Book Lover Amanda and Anne from In Search of Wonder do this video, so I'll link their videos below. And I thought it was a really interesting tag with some kind of difficult questions. When I sat down to answer them, I found I was kind of struggling with what to answer for each question. And just in the title of the tag, I had a feeling I'd have a bit of trouble. It's the Reluctant TBR Tag, so what books are on your TBR that you're reluctant to pick up because of blank? And there are a bunch of questions to answer. Some of them I had an easier time with, but some of them I really had a hard time. And I think that's because the books on my TBR, I'm not really reluctant to read them for the most part. I want to read the books that I want to read because I think I'm going to enjoy them, or because they were recommended by people that I trust. Being a big mood reader does make things difficult sometimes because I'm just not in the mood for a certain book at a certain time, but if I am in the mood for that book and I think I'll enjoy it, I'm not reluctant to pick it up. And so I just had some trouble thinking of what I would answer for each question. But I do have answers for each question minus one. Let's just go through the questions. So question one is, what is a book that you want to read, but it was a soft DNF? So you were unable to finish it the first time you picked it up and you do want to try it again. So I do have two books to answer this question. The first one is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, and I got to about page 124. So I read about that much, still have the bookmark in it, and I even started annotating it. I picked this book up several months ago and my interest wasn't really grabbed. I couldn't really get into the story. I didn't care all that much for the characters, and yes, I only read 124 pages. There's a lot more to the book than that. But I did give it a fair shot and just could not get into it. So I do want to try this again at some point. It's not a full, permanent DNF. I do want to try it again, but I need to be in the right mood for this kind of fantasy. I loved the original Mistborn trilogy. I read that a few years ago, loved it so much, and I want to read more from Brandon Sanderson. I like his writing. I found his characters in Mistborn to be fascinating and so well fleshed out, and I truly felt for them, and I am hopeful that with the rest of the Cosmere books I'll feel the same. And so after reading Mistborn, I wanted to go back to the beginning and read the Cosmere books in chronological order, so starting with Elantris, and I just couldn't get into it. So at some point I'll try it again, or maybe I'll try Warbreaker, or just continue the Mistborn series with the second era. Maybe I'll even pick up Tress of the Emerald Sea. That's an option too. But with Elantris, I do want to try it again, just when I'm in the mood for high fantasy that requires a lot of my focus. We'll see when I do pick this one up. Even though I do want to try it again, I'm not all that excited to. And we also have Les Mis. I have tried picking this book up so many times and just never continued past the first maybe 100 pages, maybe 150. Each time I picked this up, I was interested and I wanted to know what would happen. And I found the main character to be very interesting, and I wasn't hating this book at all. I wasn't bored, but I just couldn't push myself to keep going for some reason. And I kept picking up other books, and then this would just be set aside and I wouldn't continue. So just looking on Goodreads, I actually started reading this September of 2022, set it aside that November, picked it back up in January of 2023, set it aside the summer of 2023, and I haven't picked it up since. So I don't know. It's just one of those books where I'm not excited to pick it up and I'm not all that motivated to read it. I might try it again in 2025. We'll see. I'm not all that intimidated by the size. I've read big books before and I don't know. Maybe it is the size. I don't know, but I'm not all that motivated to pick it up. So question two is, what is a book you want to read, but you've read another book by that author and didn't enjoy it? So Robin Hobb. I want to try Robin Hobb again. I read the first two Farseer books in the original Farseer trilogy and I liked them, but I didn't really get on with the third book and I DNF'd it. But everyone loves Robin Hobb. Everyone loves Robin Hobb, and I feel like I should like her. Just the vibe of her books. I feel like I should like that kind of fantasy. But I just found the third book, Assassin's Quest, to be very boring, and I could not push myself to continue. But I do want to give her a go again. But I don't know. We shall see. And then we also have The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I DNF'd Crime and Punishment. I wasn't enjoying it, but I want to give this book a try. I recently watched a book review of The Brothers Karamazov by Alana, and I'll have her video linked below. and it made me very, very intrigued to read this book. I don't know if this is a good translation. The translator is Andrew McAndrew. Great name. Andrew McAndrew translated this book. I don't know if it's a good translation. If any of you have a recommendation for the best translation for this book specifically, let me know, because with Russian literature, the translation matters immensely and it will definitely impact my enjoyment of the story. So let me know your recommendations, but I do want to try this book, even though I didn't really like Crime and Punishment. Question 3, what is a book you want to read, but it's brand new and you don't know when you'll get around to it? Definitely We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. There are so many books that I want to get to. This is his brand new murder mystery. It features, I believe, a father-daughter or a father-in-law, daughter-in-law, I don't remember, but I love Richard Osman. I love the Thursday Murder Club series. I just don't know when I'll get to this one. There are so many books I want to read. I'm not usually one that reads new releases all that much. I often read them months to years after they've been released. So as much as I want to read this book, I don't know when I'll get to it. And I would also say Outlaw Noble Salt by Amy Harmon. I still have to read What the Wind Knows by her. That's the one book by her that I own. She has a lot of backlisted books as well, so it sounds really, really interesting. And these are just 2 out of many new releases that I have no idea when I'll get to, but those are the 2 books for that question. Question 4, what is a book you want to read, but the cover is painfully ugly? I'm not the pickiest with book covers. I don't care all that much what they look like. More so with classics, I don't really care, but these are 2 of the, I guess, less attractive book covers that I own and that are on my TBR. We have The Wanderer by Frances Burney. Not the nicest of covers. It's interesting. And then we also have Thomas Hardy Selected Stories, which I'm not a fan really of that cover either, but in general, I don't really care all that much. If I read a book in a really, really ugly edition and I find a nicer edition that's affordable, I'll swap them out, but for the most part, I don't care all that much. Question 5 is, what is a book you want to read, but it's a classic that might be good for you, you're just not that interested? So one of the books for my answer is one that I actually DNF'd, but I feel like I need to read it. I feel like I need to read it because I love classics. It's a classic for a reason, and I need to try it again, maybe in a different translation, but I need to try it again. And that is Don Quixote. I did DNF this one and was not really enjoying it, but I feel like I need to read it cover to cover. I will say, I don't think just because you love to read classics, you need to read every single classic under the sun, or just because you love literature or you love to study literature or you're fascinated by, you know, the evolution of literature or things like that, that doesn't mean you have to read every single book. People have very strong opinions about what classics you need to read and all of that, and I think you should read what you want to read. As soon as there's pressure and that, you know, feeling of, if I don't read this book, I'm not well read and that kind of thing, it just takes the joy away from reading. And that's not what it's about at all. But with Don Quixote, I feel like I need to read it cover to cover. I'm just not that interested in it. I wasn't really liking the story, so we'll see if that ever happens. And the other 2 books were also DNFs, and same idea with Don Quixote. I feel like I have to read them, even though I don't ever want to fall into that, you know, state of, because I love classics, I have to read these books. The 2 books I'm talking about are The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. I did try both of them. I got pretty far in both of them and just was not into them at all. They were not my kind of story. Specifically, The Count of Monte Cristo, I'm not into revenge stories, and I was just not enjoying my time reading the book. These books might be good for me, but I'm not all that interested. If any of you have read them, maybe you can convince me to try them again. So even though I've already tried these books and they're not on my unread TBR, they're really the only books that worked to answer this question. Question 6, what is a book you want to read, but it's humongous and intimidating? Again, I'm not all that intimidated by really big books, but of course there is still a little bit of, you know, that feeling of, this is really, really daunting, this book is huge. But I've already mentioned a few of them. Les Mis, it's huge, it's a brick. The Brothers Karamazov, it's also a brick. Both Cecilia and the Wanderers by Frances Burney, bricks. And Middlemarch by George Eliot. Not as big as the others, but still quite large. Question 7, what is a book you want to read? You feel like you need to read it because it's hyped, but you're not all that excited. If a book is really, really hyped, I look into it, I read reviews, I look at trigger warnings, all that jazz. I try to see if it's a book that I think I would like, and if it doesn't seem interesting to me, as hyped as it is, I don't care to read it. I don't get pulled in by book hype as much as I used to, but there are definitely a couple books where It seems like they are beloved, and I just don't know if I will love them as much as everyone else does. The first one is The Women by Kristen Hanna. The reason being, I loved one book by her, hated another book by her. I loved The Nightingale. A lot of people love that book, but I hated The Great Alone so much, and I just don't know how I'll get on with The Women, and it was very hyped, as well as Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. But this one was hyped a few years ago, not so much recently. And it's just another book where when it was first released, a lot of people were reading it, a lot of people were raving about it, and I don't know if it'll be my type of story. I've heard some things, I've heard some content warnings, I just don't know. So I'm going to give it a fair try at some point, but I'm definitely reluctant to pick it up. Question 8 is, what is a book you want to read, but you need to be in a specific mood to enjoy it? I don't have a specific book to answer this question because I could use every single book that is unread and on my shelves, on my Goodreads TBR, every book. I need to be in the mood for it. I am such a mood reader. One day I could be in the mood for fantasy and not want to see a classic in front of me. The next day I could only want to read classics and not want to see any other genre. I can be very all over the place with my reading mood. So every single book that I haven't read yet, I need to be in the mood to enjoy it. Question 9, what is the book you want to read, but you're on the fence about continuing the series? I would definitely say A Light in the Window by Jan Karon. I read the first book at home in Mitford, I think last year or the year before, and I overall enjoyed it, but it wasn't a book where I, fell head over heels in love with the characters and I was just so into it that I really wanted to continue the series. Like I got that craving to continue the series, spend more time with the characters. I never felt that. I enjoyed the first book, but just didn't love it. So I'm hesitant to continue. It's a long series. I always feel the need to complete series that I've started. And so I feel like the further I get in, the more I'm going to want to complete it, even if I'm not enjoying the books all that much. So I don't know. If you've read the first book and you think the series gets better, let me know. Maybe I will give it a go, but as of now, I'm not all that excited or interested to continue this series. Another series I'm a little hesitant to continue is the Chronicles of the King series by Lynn Austen. I have these out of order, but I did read the first and the second book, Gods and Kings and Song of Redemption, and enjoyed them, but I didn't love them. And with biblical fiction, I'm very, very picky, and I just haven't been interested to continue the series. If any of you have read the entire series, let me know if you think it's worth continuing, but I read the first 2 books so long ago and I just haven't felt the desire to continue. So that is the other series. Question number 10 is, what is a book you want to read, but it's been on your TBR for a very long time? There are so many books that have been on my TBR for a very, very long time. But looking specifically on Goodreads, I was curious to see what books were first added to my TBR. And several years ago, I added The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, as well as The Spice King by Elizabeth Camden. So those are 2 that have been on my TBR for a very, very long time. The Screwtape Letters I do own a copy of, and I'm really, really hoping to read it in January for Epistolary January, as I believe it's epistolary. I could be totally wrong, but I believe it is. And the Spice King I have on Kindle, and I don't know if I'll ever get to that one. I've tried Elizabeth Camden before and just didn't really jive with her writing, but I may give it a go. If you guys have read it and you think I'd like it, let me know. But those are the 2 books I believe that were first added to my Goodreads TBR, as well as a bunch of Agatha Christie books that I've wanted to read for a very, very long time as well. With the Screwtape Letters, I would consider all of the nonfiction written by C.S. Lewis as well, especially Mere Christianity and A Grief Observed and The Four Loves, like the main nonfiction works that he's known for. They've been on my TBR for years and years and years, and I have yet to get to them. So I just don't know when I will. I'm very, very intimidated by his nonfiction, but hopefully soon, especially the Screwtape Letters, and then hopefully Mere Christianity afterwards. Question 11, what is a book you want to read, but it's a genre outside of your comfort zone? Many books. I guess I could say Elantris for that, as it's high fantasy. High fantasy is definitely outside of my comfort zone, as well as Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I believe this is like dystopian sci-fi, that kind of thing. I honestly don't even know what this is about, but I have never read anything by this author, and I've heard good things about this book, but I'm very, very nervous to try it. It's just not what I usually read, so I'm very nervous. Question 12, what is a book you want to read, but despite owning it, you'll likely never read it? And that can include unhauled books and library books. One book immediately came to mind when I read this question, and that is Ben-Hur by Lew Wallace. And as much as I love the 50s Ben-Hur adaptation with Charlton Heston, I love that so much. I love that movie, but I'm just not interested in this book. And I've actually read the first chapter multiple times, and it's so so dry. The writing was so dry. Just in the first chapter, I am just not interested in this book. And I've heard from multiple people, just the entire book, it's dry. The dialogue is dry. I don't know. I don't think it's one I'll enjoy, but maybe some of you have read this book and think that I should try it and, you know, give it a fair shot before I decide, you know, once and for all, this is not the book for me. But yeah, I've had this for a long time and just, I don't think I'll ever read it. Question 13, I actually do not have an answer for, but it is, what is a book you want to read, but it's only out of obligation to a book club or friend's recommendation? I've mentioned before, if I have a book on my TBR, it's there because I want to read it, not because someone has, you know, pressured me to, or because it's for a book club, that kind of thing. I mean, I guess you could say a lot of the classics that are on my TBR, I feel like I need to read them because they're classics, but I don't really feel pressured to, or feel, you know, like it's out of obligation. I want to read them because they're classics for a reason. Question 14, what is a book you want to read, but negative reviews have made you less excited for it? Definitely Christmas with the Queen by Hazel Gaynor and Heather Webb. I adored their book, The Last Christmas in Paris, and a couple other people that I know have also really, really enjoyed that book, but they did not like Christmas with the Queen, did not give it very high ratings, and I trust these two, and I don't know if I'll enjoy it. I'm really, really nervous to read it, but I really want to read it because I loved The Last Christmas in Paris so much. But just in general, the consensus seems to be that this book is not as great as The Last Christmas in Paris, but we'll see. I am still definitely going to read it, and if not this Christmas, I may read it next Christmas, but I'm not as excited anymore because of the reviews that I've seen. And question 15, the last question, is what is a book you want to read but it hasn't come out yet? And for that one, my mind immediately went to The Muse of Maiden Lane by Mimi Matthews. This is the 4th book in the Bells of London series, and I enjoyed the first 2 books, loved the 3rd book, and I'm very, very excited for this one, but it hasn't come out yet. At the time that I'm filming this video, it is coming out in the next, I believe, week or so I'm really, really excited for it. I have pre-ordered it, which I don't do a lot, but I'm just so excited. The cover of this one is also beautiful, and I love Mimi Matthews' writing so much, and I'm very, very excited to read this book. But that is the final question for the Reluctant TBR tag. I would love to hear your answers below. The 16th question is technically to tag 5 people. I'm not going to tag anyone specifically, but if you've watched this video and you have a channel, consider yourself tagged. I'd love to hear your answers, and for any of you who don't have a channel, please leave your answers down below in the comments. I would love to learn about the books that you are reluctant to read and for the various reasons listed. But that's it for this video, friends. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!